There is a plant growing in the cracked corner of almost every backyard in this country, and for 3,000 years people crushed it, pressed it into wounds, and watched infections stop. It was sold across the counter in pharmacies right up until the 1940s. Doctors wrote it into official medical books. Surgeons packed it into the torn legs of soldiers when there was nothing else left in the tent. And then, inside a single generation, it disappeared from every prescription pad in the Western world. Not because it stopped working, because something happened that made it impossible to sell. Here is the part that should bother you. The compound inside this plant was measured in a laboratory on real bacteria, and it killed them. That result was published. It was never a folk rumour whispered from one gardener to the next. The trouble is that the version of the story you have probably heard, the one with 3 million views, gets the reason wrong. It tells you this plant is a miracle they hid from you. That is not what happened. And by the end of this, you will understand exactly what did, because the real reason is stranger than the conspiracy. I read 14 studies to make this, some of them close to a century old, pulled the original 1944 chemistry paper, and cross-checked every date against the pharmacy records that still exist. So this is not a guess. Now understand what is at stake for you, standing in your own garden. If you believe the miracle version, you will crush this plant, smear it on a cut, and trust it to do something it cannot reliably do. And if you believe the people who mock it, you will throw away one of the best documented antibacterial substances that ever grew in soil. Both of those mistakes cost you. One could cost you an infection that needed a real doctor. Here is what you already know, or think you know. You have been told that if a plant remedy actually worked, medicine would use it. That the reason garlic sits in your kitchen and not your medicine cabinet is that science tested it and science moved on to better things. But the pharmacy records say the opposite. Science did not walk away from this plant because it failed the test. It walked away because it passed, and passing was the problem. The plant is garlic, Allium sativum. The same bulb sitting in a bowl on your counter right now. The one you would slice into a pan tonight without a second thought. And before you decide you already know everything there is to know about garlic, stay with me, because the interesting part is not that it fights bacteria. The interesting part is why the ancient world understood it better than the century that isolated its active ingredient. Before we go further, subscribe if you would rather have the method than the promise. What comes in the next 11 minutes is not in the other videos. Go back 3,500 years to the banks of the Nile. There is a medical document from ancient Egypt, written around 1500 BC, a scroll of remedies copied down by physicians who had no idea what a bacterium was. Garlic appears in it again and again. They pressed it, they soaked it, they fed it to the men hauling stone in the sun so the workers would not fall sick and stop the work. They could not see the enemy. They could see that the men who ate the bulb kept standing while the men who did not lay down and did not get up. That knowledge did not stay in Egypt. It moved with armies and merchants across the whole ancient world. Greek physicians used garlic. Roman soldiers carried it. The bulb travelled every trade road there was, and everywhere it went, the same claim followed it, passed from one culture to the next in languages that had no word for infection. Now here is the question that should be nagging at you. How did a dozen separate civilizations, none of them able to see germs, all land on the same plant? That is not luck. And the answer to why sits inside the clove itself. Cut a clove open and something happens in that instant that does not happen while the clove sits whole. Two chemicals that live in separate compartments of the plant suddenly touch. An enzyme meets its target, and in seconds it builds a brand new molecule that did not exist a moment before. That molecule is called allicin. It is the smell. That sharp, stinging punch that hits your eyes when you crush garlic on the board. That is the compound forming in real time, and the plant makes it for one reason: to kill whatever is trying to eat it. The ancients could not name allicin, but they had stumbled onto the one condition that releases it. You have to break the clove. A whole clove does almost nothing. A crushed clove, pressed against a wound in the first minutes, is chemically a different thing entirely. Every culture that used garlic as medicine crushed it first, and not one of them knew why. They just knew that whole did not work, and mashed did. 3,000 years of trial and error had found the trigger without ever finding the reason. And that gap between knowing that something works and knowing why is the exact place this whole story goes wrong later. Hold that thought, because in a few minutes it becomes the key to everything. First, I have to show you the moment garlic stopped being a peasant remedy and became something a government issued to its army. The First World War is where the story turns hard and specific. Trenches, mud packed with the bacteria that cause gangrene, wounds that turned black and killed men slowly, and field doctors with almost nothing in the bag to stop it. Penicillin did not exist yet as a medicine anyone could use. So the British and Russian armies reached back 3,000 years and pulled garlic out of the ground. They pressed it into diluted solutions and packed it into open wounds to hold back the rot. By the Second World War, the Russian Red Army was using so much of it so systematically that soldiers gave it a name. They called it Russian penicillin. Sit with that phrase for a second. An army, in the middle of the deadliest war in human history, with real antibiotics starting to appear on the other side of the line, was still crushing garlic into the wounds of its soldiers because it worked well enough to keep men alive. In 1961, the British government put out a public call asking ordinary people to send in garlic to help meet wartime medical needs. This was not fringe. In 1926, the United States Dispensatory, one of the most official medical reference books in the country, listed garlic as a treatment for lung conditions. Doctors with diplomas on the wall recommended it. Pharmacies weighed it out and sold it. For a stretch of history that ran from the pyramids to the middle of the 20th century, this bulb was not the alternative to medicine. It was the medicine, printed in the same books as everything else a doctor could hand you. So here is where a reasonable person stops and asks the obvious thing. If it was that well established in the official books used by armies, sold in every pharmacy, then what on earth happened? How does something go from a page in the National Drug Reference to a joke about bad breath in the space of about 20 years? The answer starts in a laboratory in 1944, and it is the opposite of what the conspiracy videos tell you. In 1944, a chemist named Chester Cavallito, working with a colleague named John Bailey, did something nobody in those 3,000 years had managed. They isolated the actual compound. They pulled allicin out of the garlic, purified it, and tested it on bacteria in controlled conditions. And it worked. Diluted allicin stopped the growth of both major families of bacteria, the kind a stain turns purple, and the kind it turns pink, which in plain terms means it hit a broad range of them. Cavallito published it in the Journal of the American Chemical Society. The folk remedy had finally been proven in the exact language science demanded. You would think that is the happy ending. The old wisdom, confirmed by modern chemistry, ready to be turned into the next great drug. That is not what happened next, and the reason it did not is the whole point of this video. Because the same year allicin was proven, a different molecule was winning a war of its own, and it had one advantage garlic could never have: penicillin. By 1944, penicillin was being mass-produced for Allied troops, and it was extraordinary. It was stable. You could put it in a vial, ship it across an ocean, store it for months, and it would still work when it arrived. You could measure an exact dose. A doctor in London and a doctor in Sydney could give the identical amount and expect the identical result. And critically, a company could own it, patent it, and build a factory around it. Garlic could do none of those things, and every single one of those failures had nothing to do with whether it killed bacteria. Here is the cruel chemistry of it. Remember that allicin only forms when you crush the clove. Well, the moment it forms, it also begins to fall apart. Allicin is unstable. Leave it at room temperature and it degrades. Heat it past about 80 degrees and its power is gone within minutes, which is exactly why cooked garlic does almost nothing and why your grandmother's soup was never medicine. You cannot put allicin in a bottle and expect it to survive the trip. The thing that makes garlic work is the thing that makes it impossible to sell. Now stack the two side by side the way a hospital in 1945 had to. One drug arrives in a sealed vial, exact dose, works every time, made in a factory, owned by a company that will spend a fortune telling doctors about it. The other has to be grown, crushed fresh at the bedside, used within minutes, in a dose nobody can guarantee, by a plant no company can own and therefore no company will ever pay to advertise. Ask yourself which one the entire system was built to carry. Nobody had to conspire to answer that. The machine answered it on its own, the way water finds the lower ground. And this is the turn I promised you at the start. The reason the popular story is wrong. Nobody sat in a boardroom and banned garlic. There was no meeting, no order, no document hiding the cure. What happened is quieter and harder to fight. A whole system got built. The patents, the factories, the sales reps, the insurance codes, the clinical trials that cost tens of millions of dollars, and none of that machinery had a slot a plant could fit into. Garlic did not lose because it was weak. It lost because it could not be owned, and a thing that cannot be owned has no one to pay for its defense. Look at the money, and it becomes obvious. To bring a drug to market today costs enormous sums in trials alone, and no company spends that to prove a bulb works when any competitor could grow the same bulb the next morning and sell it cheaper. There is no patent at the end of that road, so there is no investor at the start of it. Insurance will not reimburse it. No sales representative will ever stand in a doctor's office holding a clove. The plant was left to sit in the produce aisle, priced like a vegetable, while the compound inside it, the one Cavallito proved in 1944, was quietly forgotten by the profession that once printed it in its own official book. But do not let the pendulum swing too far the other way, because this is where the miracle crowd goes off a cliff. The modern laboratory did not just confirm garlic, it also measured exactly how strong it is, and the number is humbling. When researchers compared pure allicin directly against clinical antibiotics, allicin came in at roughly 1 to 2% of the potency of streptomycin against one common bacterium, and about 8% of the strength of vancomycin. So it is real, it is measurable, and it is far weaker than the drug in the vial. Anyone selling you garlic as a replacement for an antibiotic is lying to you with a fact that is technically true. And yet, the story is not finished, because the world changed in a way that gives the old bulb a second look. Bacteria have been learning to survive our strongest antibiotics. The drugs that made garlic obsolete are themselves starting to fail against resistant strains, the ones that shrug off the vial. And here is the quietly astonishing part that recent studies keep finding. Allicin still works against some of those resistant bacteria. The compound that was too weak and too unstable to build an industry around does something the industry's best products are losing the ability to do. The reason nobody could patent it is now the reason nobody bothered to make bacteria resistant to it. So what do you actually do with this in your own kitchen tonight, with real garlic and no illusions? First, forget cooking it if the point is the allicin. Heat destroys it. Second, the crush is everything. A whole clove is close to inert. You have to break the cell walls to start the reaction, so crush or finely chop it, and then, this is the step almost everyone skips, wait about 10 minutes before doing anything else with it. That pause lets the enzyme finish building the allicin before heat or acid can interrupt it. Rush it and you get flavour without the compound. Understand the limits, because this is where a garden hobby turns into a hospital visit if you get it wrong. crushed raw garlic has genuine antibacterial activity on a surface, in a dish, in a lab. That is documented. What it is not is a treatment for a serious infection in your body. Allicin is measured in that same research as toxic to human cells too, which is part of why it was never turned into an injection. A minor thing on intact skin is one universe. A deep wound, a fever, a spreading redness, an internal infection. Those belong to a doctor and a real antibiotic. Every single time, no exceptions, no matter what a video promised you. Grow it right, and you at least have the real thing on hand. Garlic is almost embarrassingly easy to grow. You plant individual cloves in the autumn, pointed end up, a few inches down, in soil that drains well and gets sun. It sits through the winter, sends up green in spring, and by midsummer the bulb below has split into a full head of cloves. Snap off the flower stalk when it curls, so the plant sends its energy down into the bulb instead of up into a seed head. Pull it when the lower leaves brown and cure it dry for a few weeks. That is the entire skill. A single clove becomes a whole bulb in one season. Step back and look at what this story actually tells you, because it is bigger than one plant. Half the drugs in your cabinet started exactly here, as something growing in dirt that somebody noticed worked. Aspirin came out of willow bark, chewed for pain long before anyone knew why. Morphine came from the opium poppy. The heart medicine digitalis came from the foxglove flower in a cottage garden. The pattern is always the same. A plant does something real, chemistry isolates the reason, and then industry keeps only the parts it can own, patent and ship in a vial, and lets the plant itself fade back into the ground it came from. Garlic is the clearest case of all, because with garlic we can see every stage in the daylight. We have the 3,000-year record, the 1944 proof, the exact reason it was left behind, and the recent studies quietly picking it back up as our own drugs weaken. What they let fade was never a miracle and never a hoax. It was an ordinary bulb that happened to make a real weapon, one that could not be bottled, so the system that runs on bottles had no use for it. That is the thing worth remembering, and it is worth remembering because it is still happening right now to plants whose names you have not heard yet. Which brings up the question I cannot stop thinking about. If garlic, the most documented healing plant in human history, could slip through the cracks this completely, sitting in plain sight in every grocery store while the profession that once prescribed it forgot it on purpose, then how many others are out there? How many plants got the exact same treatment proven and then abandoned for the crime of being unownable? Their evidence buried not in a vault, but in old journals nobody reads anymore. There is one growing in most lawns in this country that has a paper trail almost as long as garlic's, and almost nobody knows what it did. And if you want more remedies tested like this one, the real evidence and the real limits, with nothing invented and nothing hidden, subscribe before you go. The next one I am putting up is that lawn plant, and I am going to show you the studies that the miracle channels and the debunkers have both somehow managed to ignore.